Well, today we are going to continue our sermon series on getting along with the people that you live with. Today we're talking about getting your own way. When is it appropriate to expect that? And next week we're going to talk about when is it okay to walk away from a relationship. When is that the healthiest option? But today I want to talk about getting your own way. Now, if you've got questions or comments that you would like to have us interact with, please feel free to send them to me. So my email or my text number is 780-262-0940. You'll see it up on the screen as well as we go through the talk a few times today. So send me a text, and if you would like me to just respond to you in private, just mention that in your text. Otherwise, I will make a video sometime during this week and post it on our Facebook page in response to your text. So I once knew a couple, true story, a couple who were both very strong-willed, and when it came time to make decisions, it was almost inevitable that they would see things differently. And they would argue and try to negotiate and try to work it out and could never compromise. It just would not work for them. And so they came up with quite a different way of resolving their differences. They would play bridge, and whoever won got to decide what they were going to do. So they would do this for small things and big things. So they wanted to buy a house. They couldn't decide on which house to buy. He wanted this one, she wanted that one. So they played bridge, and whoever won got to choose their house. They were going to buy a new vehicle. He would like this one, she would like this one. They'd play bridge, and whoever won would get their choice, make the decision. They both became very good bridge players, and so they, would win on different occasions and got their way on different occasions. Now, you may not be that strong-willed, both of you in your relationship, or maybe it's with your roommates or whatever, and you might find other creative ways to make decisions together, compromise or whatever, but that's the way they did it. So my question that I want to wrestle with today is, what do you do when you're living with people who strongly want their own way, or you are maybe one of them too, you strongly want your own way, and you just can't decide which way to go? So I want to start by looking at a scripture together. So this is a scripture written by a guy named Paul. Now, Paul is uniquely qualified to speak to this topic because he was a very, very strong-willed person, especially before he met Jesus. And he met Jesus in a very dramatic way. You can read about that in the book of Acts. And then Jesus began to change his attitude, and he became much more easy to get along with after that. But he knows the mindset of a strong-willed person. And so when he writes, he's writing as somebody who is definitely tuned in to this whole scenario. So I want to go to a little book that he wrote. It's actually a letter, really, called Philippians. So he wrote this to a church. It was just a small little church that met in a home in a city called Philippi. And I want to go to the second chapter, and I want to read 3 verses there. Verses 3, 4, and 5. So here's what Paul wrote. Be free from pride-filled opinions, for they will only harm your cherished unity. Don't allow self-promotion to hide your hearts, but in authentic humility, put others first and view others as more important than yourselves. Abandon every display of selfishness. Possess a greater concern for what matters to others instead of your own interests, and consider the example that Jesus, the Anointed One, has set before us. Let his mindset become your motivation. So Paul is pretty clear here that we are to be very keen to hear other people's perspectives rather than trying to get them to listen to us. Now, there's a modern day writer that basically keyed off of this same concept. Stephen Covey is his name. And in the 7 Habits of a Highly Successful Person, which was one of his bestsellers, he writes, seek first to hear before being listened to. So that's kind of a modern take on that same idea. Jesus' very own brother, James, or Jacob, like Jesus would have called him, he put it this way: seek first, or be quick to listen and slow to speak. Maybe your own mother put it this way: you've got 2 ears and 1 mouth. That says something about how much you should use those things. Either way, listening is a key function in being able to resolve conflict. When we listen carefully enough, often people respond better. So how carefully do you need to listen? Most of us want to believe that we are good listeners. And I've had all kinds of people, respond to me going, oh yeah, I know exactly what you're saying. But I don't feel like they are really listening to me. So here's a little rule of thumb. If you can reiterate to the other person what they said to you clear enough that they agree that you fully understood what they said, then you have truly listened. So I've actually been in exercises where we did this. So the person would say something and then you would explain to them what you just heard. And then when they are satisfied that what you're explaining to them is indeed what they meant, then you can move forward because you feel comfortable that you have really heard them. And they feel comfortable that you have really heard their heart and understood them for what they mean. And most people are willing to be more flexible in negotiating a compromise when they feel truly heard. That's one of the key things in good communication. So that often opens up the door for further compromise. And if you make a shortcut at that stage of the conversation so the other person doesn't feel truly heard, you are going to run into brick wall after brick wall in trying to negotiate. So that can be a very, very important thing. But Dallas, what if you feel very strongly about your perspective and you're really not willing to compromise? When is it appropriate to say, no, I am not willing to back away from my position on this particular issue? Well, if you feel really strongly about your perspective, likely there's one of 2 things that is going on. The first one could be that you actually have found the solution for the situation that is best for everybody involved. Maybe your solution is a win-win solution for everybody, and that's why you feel so strongly about it. And if that is the case, often other people will begin to gradually warm up to your idea, and they'll begin to see how it benefits them as well, and they will likely come around. And now here's the caution in that. We actually all want to believe that our perspective is the right perspective. And so we actually convince ourselves that we have the best solution. And sometimes when we feel really strongly about a certain opinion of our own, it's a signal that we are trying hard to convince ourselves. We aren't deep down fully convinced that ours is the right answer, but we're trying really hard to convince ourselves. And so we become really adamant. And the reason we become adamant is because when you become forceful in the way you present your opinion, you actually intimidate people around you to not speak their opinions. And so when other people begin to be quiet, it's a way for us to reassure ourselves that yes, indeed, our opinion is the right opinion. And this can be very self-deceiving. A few months ago, we talked about a study that was done in 1999 by two scientists called Dunning and Kruger. Dunning and Kruger talked about how we are the most confident in our opinions at the very beginning of the learning curve, when we know just a little bit. Once we start to learn more about that topic, our confidence actually begins to drop. And we begin to realize there's a lot more to this than what I initially realized. And it's not until way further down the line, where I've studied way more about this issue, that I start to feel a sense of settled confidence that I know what I'm talking about. And once I get to that place where I have that settled confidence, I no longer need to convince myself that I know what I'm talking about, because I know that I know what I'm talking about. And so I don't need to be as adamant or as emphatic. And I certainly don't need to intimidate other people with my sense of convincing myself that I know what I'm talking about. That first part where we are super confident in our perspective, Kruger and Dunning called Mount Stupid. None of us wants to live on Mount Stupid. So it's very important for us to listen to other perspectives so that we grow in our knowledge of the situation and move down the other side of Mount Stupid and into a place of further learning. And then we are able, as we learn more, to be willing to embrace more perspectives and find other compromises. The other thing that could be going on if you are very adamant about your perspective is that that could be a sign that there's some internal work that still needs to be done in your heart. When we are wounded in our hearts, we often don't understand our own motivations. We don't understand why we react the way we do in certain situations, or react the way we do when we are trying to work out a compromise with somebody. We get triggered by different scenarios that cause us to become very strong and very come across in very, very opinionated ways. And so when you feel really strongly about your perspective, a very healthy question to ask yourself is, why do I want this so badly? What is it about this that causes me to feel so strongly about this? And not only ask yourself, but ask God. I believe God actually delights to help us see what's going on inside of us. You might even want to ask a counselor. I've gone to many, many counselors over the years who have been very helpful in helping me see some of the inner things that are going on inside of me. Or ask a good friend, somebody who knows you well, somebody who you know will be honest with you and not just kind of sugarcoat things. Maybe they shouldn't even be a Canadian, because as Canadians we like to dance around issues. Maybe ask wise people in your life, people that truly have the wisdom of experience and are able to understand where you're coming from. Or, this has worked for me many times, ask an author. There's lots of great books about understanding your inner world out there that can help you with that. And maybe you don't even need to read a whole book. Maybe you can just read an article or watch a YouTube video that'll help you kind of give a hint to start moving you in the right direction. And often wounds in our soul make us very, very sensitive. And we can become very, very uptight when those wounds are being poked at. I mean, you think about it, when you have a physical wound, like if you cut your finger or something like that, normally if somebody touched your finger, you wouldn't even bat an eye about it. But if you've got a deep wound in your finger and somebody cuts or touches that, you could get very adamant very quickly, because that's a very sensitive area for you. And it's the same way with our soul. If somebody accidentally happens to bump an area where there's a wound, you might feel very, very deeply about defending that area or protecting that area. And your opinion can come across very, very adamantly. Now, when our soul is wounded, you want to have somebody who can heal that wound. And just the same thing as when you've got a wound on your physical body, you want to go to a medical professional who is able to help you heal. Now, I don't know about you, but I prefer a medical professional when I'm hurt who is compassionate and is gentle and is able to do their work in a way that has a sense of comfort to it. They come across with gentleness and comforting words and an attitude of confidence. Well, actually, Jesus is the perfect person to help you heal those wounds. This is what Jesus wrote in Matthew chapter 11 and verses 28 to 30. He says, "Are you weary, carrying a heavy burden? Then come to me. I will refresh your soul, for I am your oasis. Simply join your life with mine. Learn my ways, and you'll discover that I'm gentle, humble, easy to please. You will find refreshment and rest in me. For all that I require of you will be pleasant and easy to bear." That sounds like a wonderful person to care for our wounded hearts. So if you find yourself really uptight about certain issues, bring them to Jesus. He's the perfect person to deal with those things, to help you, help you with those things. Now, Jesus, he doesn't just sort of throw some reading at you or kind of just tell you, you tough it out, get up, dust yourself off, don't be such a baby, get over it. That's not Jesus' approach. Jesus comes with a real gentle approach. He doesn't just give you a bunch of rules and say, okay, do X, Y, and Z, and then you'll be fine. And don't be so stupid anymore. He doesn't do that. He comes with this beautiful sense of care and compassion. And he promises to never leave us. He walks with us through the whole process of healing our souls. He brings us to a place of freedom internally, which lowers the pressure internally and makes us less uptight, brings us to that place where we are able to embrace freedom and wholeness. That's what he does for us. Now, when we are full of inner wounds, it's challenging to love other people. It's almost like walking through life on a minefield. There's so many things that we have to dance around. And Jesus is like a minesweeper in our souls. He gently and carefully pulls those mines out of our souls one at a time, which makes it easier to run and to walk and to be free, to not have to think through every move we make so carefully. It's a beautiful thing that he does, but it's delicate work. Just like minesweeping is delicate work, so is healing our souls. So be patient with yourself. Be patient with the process. Allow Jesus to walk with you slowly but surely through those sensitive areas. Often he has to bring them to the surface first, which can feel extremely vulnerable. You can feel like things are actually moving backwards initially because you're being more sensitive, become more sensitive as those things come to the surface. Right now, they may be covered over with all kinds of other coping mechanisms, but Jesus unpacks or peels away those coping mechanisms to bring to those things to the surface so that he can heal them from the bottom up. So don't beat yourself up. If you're in that process with Jesus right now, be encouraged. He will help you. Sometimes things like we've just gone through with isolation, with having restrictions put on our lives, can bring those things to the surface. Our coping mechanisms that we normally do might have been taken away from us, and we're feeling the tension and the pressure right now in a whole new way. Allow Jesus to help heal those things by walking you through the healing process in your soul. I knew a lady one time who grew up in a very, very strict home. Her parents' typical response to her was very demanding. They had a rule for everything. And if she ever asked why, their response was, "Because I said so." That's all there was to it. There was never an explanation, never a willingness to talk to her about why things needed to be done. It was just, you just do what I say. That's it. When she got married, she felt a very strong need to get her way. It was like she had been denied her own sense of identity or autonomy for her whole growing up years. And so when she got married, she became very adamant about every situation with her husband. Every time there was a disagreement, she had to get her way. And she felt this sense of desperation to never let anybody rob her of her personal power like her parents did all of her growing up years. And so there was lots of intense moments with her husband in the first years of their marriage. And he was so surprised that she was so adamant about every single situation that seemed to arise. He just couldn't understand it. But he was very loving and gentle with her and very patient with her. And they started to explore some of the reasons why she might feel like this. And he was very loving with her. And his love, his patience, his gentleness, his kindness began to crack open the doorway into her soul. And Jesus began to come in there and heal. And gradually, slowly, over time, the pressure inside of her began to subside, and she began to become more and more relaxed and less adamant about her way, and they began to have less and less arguments. And when they did have disagreements, they were able to find compromises more easily. And their marriage, I'm happy to say, today is very happy. They can easily work together and work out good solutions between the two of them. And she no longer feels that sense that I have to have my way on different situations, because Jesus has done a beautiful work of healing in her life. She's a much more secure person today. And so she doesn't need to push her weight around to prove her sense of worth or her sense of power. And it's a beautiful thing to see, but you got to realize it's taken years to get here. I think she's been married over 25 years now, and it's been a gradual process all down through those years. I don't know where you're at today with your loved ones or the people you live with. Maybe you get along great. Maybe you do have some areas, as we say, some buttons that people sometimes push. If you're in that boat today, I would really encourage you to invite Jesus into those areas. And some of us, we have this idea that we need to fix ourselves first before we come to Jesus. That is so backwards. Jesus actually came to us right where we're at. That's why he came from heaven to earth. He didn't cause us to have to come from earth to heaven. He came from heaven to earth to meet us right where we're at. That's what he does. That's what he specializes in. So even if you are so embarrassed to show anybody those internal struggles that you're feeling, I guarantee you, you can trust Jesus. He will not judge you. He will not come down in a harsh way on you. He will be gentle. And so if you're in that place, maybe you've never even thought of inviting Jesus into your heart before, why don't you do that today? What a wonderful thing to do on Mother's Day. To invite Jesus, just like you would invite a gentle, loving mother into your heart. Invite him into your heart to heal your wounds. And just be open with him. Just say, hey, Jesus, I know that there's areas in my life that need work. So I'm going to trust you to do that work inside of me. And then be patient. Let him work through the process with you. It won't all happen at once. But if you allow Jesus in, you will begin to see that he will let his healing begin to seep into your soul. And just keep coming back to him for his love to heal the fear, the insecurity, the hurt, all of those things. It's almost like putting salve on a wound and then a bandage to keep it safe. It will begin to heal as he works with you. I'd like to pray with you as we come to the end of our time today. And if you're in that boat where you know you want Jesus to come and heal your soul, to let some of the pressure off the inner part of your world, why don't you pray with me as we close today? Dear Jesus, I know there's still sore spots in my soul. I know that there's still wounds that need healing. So I'm inviting you, Jesus, to come into my soul and to heal those areas that have been wounded by other people. I allow you to take away my coping mechanisms if you need to, so that I can see what's going on and you can clean out those wounds and apply the oil of your healing love and let healing begin to happen. Help me, Lord, to become more gentle and kind, patient and understanding, not always need to get my way. Help me, Jesus, to be able to really listen well, learn from what other people say, and be willing to find compromises that are truly win-win for everybody involved. Thank you for your help, Jesus. Amen. Well, thank you for joining us today. It's been great to have you online with us. And if you have questions, feel free to text them to me. My number, 780-262-0940. And I will respond to you in whatever way you like. And we will see you here again next Sunday at 10:30 on Facebook Live. Bye for now.